Welcome to the Systems Alliance. My name is Jexy, and in this video we're going to go over the current state of Bioware's Dragon Age. And obviously Bioware's had a tough time recently with the launch of Anthem, and that just really not doing well on all fronts. But the games that Bioware is good at, Mass Effect, Dragon Age, those are the two just main titles that everyone does love. Well, what's going on with Dragon Age 4? And it's a bit messy. So my first takeaway from this article that Jason Schreier did, and really this is just from his investigation into Anthem, he just happened to learn a ton about what's going on with Dragon Age. And my first takeaway from this, after reading everything, is that, man, ever since EA acquired them, it's just been downhill for the franchises that people love. And I'll get into that a bit more, but when you think about it, Inquisition was launched 4 years ago. I mean, there should have been a new game out by now. Like, we should be playing it right now, but yet we aren't. I mean, just a few months ago, December 2018, is when we got the trailer, the teaser trailer for Dragon Age 4. I mean, you got Solus there. Obviously, if you played the Trespasser DLC at the end of Inquisition, you know everything that's going on there. I mean, that's clearly going to be the next big part of the game, but shouldn't this have been playing? Like, well, what's going on? I thought we had this down. Well, turns out when EA owns you, they really own you, and you're kind of forced to do things that you probably otherwise wouldn't do if you weren't owned by EA. EA, of course, pushes a live service element now for every single one of its games. And let me tell you how it's been working for games that shouldn't have live service. Not well. Dragon Age 4 was actually rebooted in 2017, basically to include live service features in it, so EA can somehow monetize it the entire time. Now, you might remember Inquisition having multiplayer, and that might be a whole separate video, but the multiplayer for Dragon Age Inquisition sucked. It flat out sucked. Mass Effect 3's multiplayer, that did work out well. And unfortunately, it led EA down a very dark path in terms of loot boxes and microtransactions, but it was still fun to play. Inquisitions sucked, and so who knows what they're going to try and do this time, how they're going to try and get the most money out of you. If you just made a good multiplayer game, maybe that works, and of course, make it just microtransactions. Leave the loot boxes out of here, because that's just going to get EA in trouble and has been getting EA in trouble with all sorts of governments, jurisdictions, countries around the world. So they could do it right, but I mean, when has EA shown that they'll actually do something right? Internally, it's been an absolute struggle for BioWare. I mean, what people love about the studio, great storytelling with graphics to match and fun game mechanics and just a great all-around game, that's being put up against EA's profit, try and just squeeze every last penny. They are just ruining and just do not mesh well with BioWare. And in many of the interviews, they actually say that. The people actually say they always feel like the black sheep, the redheaded stepchild of EA, in that not only do they make RPGs and the rest of EA is making shooters and sports games and just cashing in year over year, just churning that garbage out, and they're trying to make good quality games, they also don't think that they're getting all the resources that those other ones are doing. Now, of course, they make more money, but EA knew when they bought BioWare what BioWare games were like and why they had success. And once they've tried to tamper with that recipe, BioWare has not been as successful. People have not loved the games. People have been turning away from BioWare. And Anthem, I think, really hurt the brand. I mean, Andromeda, that was the first major fall for BioWare, fall from grace, you could say. But now with Anthem, two real kind of stinkers in a row. And Andromeda was more of a very big disappointment, which could have been corrected, but EA chose not to. But with Anthem, it's just a flat out bad game. It's not good. It's not what we were promised. It's not what was promised in the trailers. People don't like it. And that's 2 in a row from BioWare. That's not a good sign. All of these internal struggles at BioWare with EA led to the departure of Mike Laidlaw, the creative director of Dragon Age. Other key employees of BioWare, whether it was from Mass Effect, Dragon Age, whatever it was, they left because of all of these struggles. So when I hear people like Mark Dara saying, oh yeah, EA is great, blah, 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 I don't believe you. I don't believe you because none of your people believe you either. Jason mentions the saddest thing about the 2017 reboot of Dragon Age 4 is that the entire team thought they were doing things right. So in other words, Dragon Age Inquisition had a lot of things that could have been improved in it. A lot of things that people wanted to go back to how it was in Origins in terms of just things that worked that they weren't able to accomplish in Inquisition, either because they were out of time, they were being crunched at the end like crazy, or the Frostbite engine simply couldn't do it, or they weren't given it enough time to make it work on the Frostbite engine. And the crazy thing is, the sequel, Dragon Age 4, up until 2017, they were pretty much giving us, BioWare fans, people who are fans of Mass Effect and Dragon Age, the good games, they were pretty much giving us everything we could have possibly wanted. But then he mentions Anthem was on fire and all hands were on deck, and so everyone was called to basically put that fire out, and unfortunately they never got it out. So in 2014, as we all know, BioWare released Dragon Age Inquisition, and it was the first game that used EA's Frostbite engine. Now, a whole host of problems came with that, but despite the production of it being absolutely catastrophic and burning people out, causing depression, causing them to quit, not just the studio, but the industry as a whole, all sorts of mental problems and fatigue that the development cost people, they were like, okay, well, I guess it was worth it, or at least in some way worth it, because won several Game of the Year awards, sold well, was critically reviewed well, and fans liked it. So all over, it was a pretty good game. I mean, I liked it, definitely. I know a lot of you did. And overall, I really like it. Now, the things that were lacking, though, were noticeable. Now, I mentioned some of this in my Anthem review, but Frostbite was built for first-person shooters. It didn't even have a save game function. It didn't even have third-person mode. It didn't have any of the basic functions we take for granted with a BioWare game or any RPG. So that's why one of the biggest disappointments for myself and other people who picked up Inquisition is the whole power wheel thing. It simply just wasn't there. I mean, what's the point of upgrading all your powers when all you can use are just 8 powers, basically? It was either 7 or 8, but it was pretty limited in what you could use. And why? Well, that's just how the system was. I mean, Frostbite was not built for RPGs, but EA wants to save a couple of bucks and not use the Epic Game Engine. So instead, they force people to use something that doesn't work. In addition to that, they hired too many people in the beginning, which means they had a bunch of people doing nothing and who weren't good at it, which means they had to redo all of their work later just to get the game released. And then on top of that, they weren't able to get those same people back during the crunch time, so more of their same people had to crunch even further. And on top of that, as you may remember, the game was also being released not just on the new consoles, Xbox One and PS4, but still the 360 and the PS3. And so they had to scale the game down, and it definitely, from everything that I hear from people who have played it on those later generation consoles, just didn't play as well. Very glitchy, much smoother on the newer consoles and PCs. And Mike Laidlaw actually said one of the biggest problems going into Inquisition is that they were constantly second-guessing themselves because of the poor reception for Dragon Age 2. Now, why was Dragon Age 2 received poorly? Well, as we know, that's when EA was buying them out, and they forced BioWare to shove it out the door unfinished. So not only was the story going to be much smaller and scaled back, but still could have been good, they didn't even allow them to finish that. A lot of the DLC was supposed to already be in there, and on top of that, the actual game was not finished. While the fighting mechanics were good, you could tell definitely in some places wasn't quite polished enough. Plus the repeating rooms and like, oh, let's put a door here and that makes it different. No, I've been here like 8 times before. It just different missions was not something that anyone liked about it. Especially coming off Dragon Age Origins, which was a masterpiece, Dragon Age 2 is definitely a big disappointment and a letdown. On top of that, with the new engine, they were adding new gameplay, so things just were bad, and everyone was completely burnt out once the game finally launched. And Laidlaw and Dara basically told the BioWare staff who worked on Dragon Age, hey, this will never happen again. We're never going to do this again. We're going to get better. We know the mistakes we made, and we're going to fix them next time, and it just simply won't happen. It'll be better next time, which unfortunately were empty promises because I guess they didn't really have the authority anymore to make that call because now EA is telling them what to do. And when I say EA is telling them what to do, what I really mean is there's 2 things. EA is telling them they have to use the Frostbite engine, which is a huge limitation, and they're saying it has to have live service features, aka something that doesn't really fit well into BioWare's RPG. So it's not completely EA's fault. I mean, most of it is actually on BioWare, just as it is with Anthem. The problem is that it's almost like you're starting with one hand tied behind your back and one leg tied behind your back, and you're just hopping along trying to do stuff very difficult to do when you're not working with an engine that is made for your games, and you have to develop the games around a certain type of live service that also is not a natural fit for your games. I know a lot of people are putting it on Bioware, and I am too, but they really wouldn't be having this problem if it wasn't for EA in the first place. And maybe some of that Bioware magic could have worked itself out if they didn't have those same limitations. So not only did management say that this would never happen again, they're going to do better, they actually crafted ways to not only do better, but almost, foolproof ways so that everything they would do later on would be better for Dragon Age 4. And a lot of people said that was the best work experience they ever had. Everyone was on the same page, working towards the same goal, making a really good Dragon Age 4 game. And unfortunately, EA forced them to abandon it, and that's why we're kind of still late in the game here and early in the development for Dragon Age 4. So the interesting thing about the original Dragon Age 4 that got canceled and rebooted to the Dragon Age 4 we're going to be getting is that it really sounded cool. It sounded like Dragon Age Origins in a way. So the focus was on repeat playthroughs, just like Dragon Age Origins, with something different every time. You're going to be playing as a group of spies in the Tevinter Imperium. So for those Dragon Age fans out there, the Tevinter Imperium is somewhere where you've always want to go, someplace that's always seems so crazy and foreign, and you were going to get to be there. I'm sure they would have all different backgrounds, whichever one you pick, and then you'd have your group there. So it was going to be pretty awesome. On top of that, the areas were going to be smaller and there'll be fewer fetch quests, which pretty much just kind of waste your time, but still, as RPG fans, we still want to complete, so we're kind of just wasting our time and not having nearly as much fun as we did in Dragon Age Origins. And one of the things that we're going to bring back is the smaller areas and specific areas that were in Dragon Age Origins. And they were going to get rid of basically the hinterlands. So if you remember that spot in Dragon Age Inquisition, too big, too much stuff. You could roam around forever. If I wanted to do that, I'd play Skyrim. I don't want that to be in my Dragon Age game. And outside of the game mechanics, that was the kind of second biggest complaint people had about Inquisition. Too much, nothing, not enough direction. And this one was going to have more of that signature Bioware feel that the Mass Effect trilogy had, Origins had, and even to an extent Dragon Age 2, although that was maybe too limiting. Now, the first big problem came in 2016 when they were trying to fix Andromeda, and it was all hands on deck for that as well. So sound familiar? All hands on deck for Anthem. Same with Andromeda. All hands were on deck for that. And they had to pull the Dragon Age team off of Dragon Age 4. And they say something interesting in the article. They're actually in the credits. So if you actually watch the credits for Andromeda, it actually says Dragon Age 4 team and everyone involved who helped fix Andromeda to the point where it could even be released. Never mind that it still wasn't finished upon release, but they helped at least get it to the point of being able to release it. So after Andromeda shipped in 2017, it was back to Dragon Age for the team, and as people started rolling off Anthem, the people who worked on Anthem, they kept joining the Dragon Age team to boost Dragon Age 4 up, and they were happy because, they just worked on a Mass Effect game that no one really liked. So nice to be back in Dragon Age. Everyone still likes Dragon Age. It was a boost for that team, and things were kind of going well at that point. Interestingly enough, people already back then could see that Anthem was going to be a disaster. All the way back in 2017, they were like, this Anthem thing, this is going to be just like Andromeda, just in a big cluster. And they were right. So the main reason why everyone thinks and pretty much knows why the good version of Dragon Age 4 was canceled, well, it's canceled because they weren't really talking about multiplayer much. And that's the thing that is going to bring EA the money. And even Inquisition's multiplayer, because it kind of stunk, didn't bring EA the money, the kind of money that they wanted. And they want all their games to make $1 billion, which is an absurd goal, and a goal that will, at the end of the day, only lose you money with most of your franchises, because it's like saying every Marvel movie that comes out must make $1.5 billion. Like, that's not reasonable. Your Avengers are going to make that much. Everything else isn't going to, but that's what EA thinks about gaming. They don't understand the different franchises and how they appeal to different people, and that you can still make a bunch of money doing it the right way. EA only cares about making money at all costs and the most money possible. They don't care if they burn everyone into the ground or it's just a poor job doing it. Unfortunately, that's just not how they see things. And of course, that made them question how EA feels about them. Do they actually care about RPGs? Most people think no, they don't. They don't care about gaming at all. They don't care about gamers at all. They just care about money. And so because that Dragon Age just didn't fit how EA wants it, it was canned. And so you can be sure that this new Dragon Age 4 that we do get, it's going to have live service somehow and try to get the most money out of you. And really, that could be looking at the death of BioWare. A flop with Mass Effect, a flop with Anthem, a game that they probably shouldn't have been on in the first place. And then this next Dragon Age, we don't know anything about it. It could be good, but in terms of the gameplay, it might not be what BioWare fans want. And that's really going to be the only people that buy your game, especially continuing a story. So it's not like it'll reach an entire brand new audience. I mean, there'll be some, but most will still be coming from the original trilogy, fans of that. So if you burn that bridge, you're not going to be left with anything. So after Dragon Age 4, that Dragon Age 4 at least fell apart, a tiny team began working on the next Dragon Age 4. And that next Dragon Age 4 is actually being built on the code base and being built with the tools for Anthem. Now, Anthem did not work out well, but yet they put so much money into it. They're like, well, we got to get our money somehow. So that's going to be the base of which Dragon Age 4 is being built on. So forget going back to Dragon Age Origins, which is what they were going to do. And I'm sure a lot of you BioWare fans right now are thinking, is there some way we can buy out this company? Just how a lot of fans were saying, is there some way we can buy out Blizzard from Activision? Unfortunately, I don't think it's going to happen. So you're going to have a game based off of Anthem's code base and tools, build set, everything. And that's going to be your next Dragon Age game. Now, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying it's going to be bad. I'm just saying, look at the track record that's been going on here recently with both BioWare and EA. It's not good. Now, the good thing for BioWare is that EA said on their balance sheet, they're going to wipe the slate clean and not charge them or include in their budget all the money that they spent over the past 2 years developing the previous Dragon Age game that did not go anywhere. So that's kind of a big bonus. I mean, if you're developing something. So for instance, the movie Superman Returns, the actual budget of that movie is said to somewhere be between a high $180 million to $204 million. But if you look some places, it says $270 million, which would make it a big money loser. But 70 to 80 million of those dollars, of the 270, was actually from the Superman movie that never came out. I believe that one was going to be Superman Lives, the Nicolas Cage one. You know, a whole bunch of production money, all this other stuff that went into it. Well, it never came out. So they just threw that money in with the Superman Returns budget. I always said, well, that's weird. And if they have to throw it somewhere, they have to throw it somewhere. But Superman Returns never cost that much money. But luckily with BioWare in this case, they won't have that type of burden on them. Thus, they won't have the expectations to sell even more. So when it was first reported that the new Dragon Age 4 will be a live service game in 2018, reported by Jason, Casey Hudson had a response on Twitter, and he said the following. Reading lots of feedback regarding Dragon Age, and I think you'll be relieved to see what the team is working on. Story and character focused. Too early to talk details, but when we talk about live, it just means designing a game for continued storytelling after the main story. That being said, Casey Hudson reassured us when it came to Anthem, and turned out that everything he said about Anthem, that was supposed to be almost what he said about Dragon Age, never came to pass. I used to love you, Casey Hudson. I used to love you. I'm sure you're still a great guy, but I'm not so sure anymore. I'm not so sure that what you say is true, because Andromeda was supposed to be great. You look at the trailers, Casey Hudson was part of it then. All these great ideas didn't pan out. Then you look at Anthem. Everything was supposed to be a combination of like a Destiny plus like a Mass Effect. You put it all together and that isn't what we got. So fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Try and fool me thrice. I don't know. Things just suck. I don't know what the comeback is for that, but it doesn't look good. So because of the negative reception of Andromeda and because of the negative reception of Anthem, okay, we made these mistakes. How do we fix it in the future? So they were already working on fixing Inquisition's mistakes, which were few and far between when you compare them to Mass Effect Andromeda and Anthem. So can they somehow combine learning from all the mistakes from all these 3 games into a great game? And they could. Internally, they're so early in the process, we just don't know what it's going to look like. People were joking, okay, if it's being based off of the Anthem code, is it going to be like Anthem with dragons? Apparently that is not what it's going to be, but we kind of still don't know what it's going to be. Some people are hoping it might be in the good parts of Diablo 3, so not like how everyone hated Diablo 3, but the point of you did not have to play with others. You could play the game totally by yourself, yet still be online. And people are saying maybe that's how Dragon Age 4 is going to be, because right now there's no talk of having an offline version, which I think would suck. I personally think that that would suck. I mean, Monster Hunter World, you don't have to be necessarily connected to play it. I mean, I've lost my internet connection while playing Monster Hunter World, and you just keep playing. Sure, you can't do some of the features, but you can play the main game, the campaign, the part that everyone plays a Bioware game for. So there is hope for that in terms of maybe it won't affect it too much. Maybe it would be like a Monster Hunter World and look at all the stuff you can do online, but when it comes to offline, you can do the same stuff, you just miss out on other cool features. They did say that the main story is designed for single player, so that's a good sign there. But one of the things that wasn't nice to hear is that great DLC like, say, Trespasser or like Lair of the Shadow Broker for Mass Effect, while they were profitable and they were amazing, they don't make a ton of money. Like, they'll make their money back, nice little profit off of it, but it's a lot of resources to expend, and the payoff is decent, but it's not like a crazy money maker, whereas, of course, loot boxes and microtransactions are. So it doesn't sound like when they say you can continue the story, it would be DLC like that. Not quite sure what it does look like, though. It's obviously not going to look like Inquisition was with the separate campaign single player and the multiplayer, because that's technically not live service. People are saying maybe you'll have drop-ins like in Baldur's Gate, you'll be able to interact with other people that way, but when people play these Bioware games, it's a solo adventure for them. That's the whole point of single player games. They're still huge. You see them selling huge all over the place. So why they just can't accept that, hey, if you make it real good, it'll just sell millions of copies and you'll make hundreds of millions of dollars. I don't understand why they just can't accept that fact. Instead, they're like, well, because we're shoving Frostbite down everyone's throat, it's probably not going to be good. So we got to make money somehow. I don't know what the mindset of EA is given this direction, but unfortunately, Bioware is definitely paying the price. Their franchises are paying the price and the fans are paying the price. So who knows what it's going to turn out like. People are internally saying it'll probably change 5 times between now and launch anyway. So while it's interesting to speculate, it sounds like we're never really going to know anyway, maybe until the last couple years. The main thing at the studio that they were trying to address with Mark Darr, Casey Hudson, all the other higher ups, is that all the anxiety, the depression, the turnover, how people were feeling just crappy, that they were saying, hey, we're going to do better. That's not going to be the case in the future. This is not going to happen with Dragon Age 4, blah, blah, blah. It happened with Andromeda, it happened with Anthem, so obviously, do they want it to happen again? No, but things aren't looking too good. They've lost tons of their best creative people. You've seen the exodus over the past few years of them. This is why it's just not worth it for them. It's not worth it for their stress, their families, their bodies, their mental and physical well-being. But here's kind of the issue going forward. Jason writes, the depression and anxiety that has been described by current and former Bioware employees didn't just result from crunch. It came from people who felt stressed and exhausted, who felt like they couldn't voice their opinions, who felt like their goalposts were constantly moving, who felt like they'd be targeted for speaking out. Those were issues of management and leadership, not just scheduling. In order to protect the identities of the employees who spoke to us in the Anthem article, we weren't able to share some of the saddest and most devastating anecdotes we heard during reporting, but they painted an ugly picture. So we'll have to see how it all turns out in the future. One thing with people connected with Bioware that he says that they all wish outside of getting rid of Frostbite, which is clearly the number one issue, it's that just like the Dragon Age 4 game that we were going to get, hopefully the Dragon Age 4 game that we are going to get is just as good as that game, and that they're going to do it the right way without burning their people out in the process. So kind of a mess. I'm worried. I mean, like I said, fool me once, fool me twice. You're looking at a third time here. Do we even trust what they say? Obviously, this is not a pre-order. Not that most games are, but this is definitely one that you better wait and see how it actually is. And yeah, let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. What do you think? Do you think this game could turn out well? What are your thoughts on the Dragon Age 4 game that we were going to get that we're not going to get? What are your thoughts on how they're burning people out in Anthem and Andromeda, and that they really hope not to in Dragon Age 4? The State of Bioware, have they lost their luster? Are they pretty much down in the muck with the rest of EA? Who do you put more of the blame on with all of this? Is it on Bioware or is it on EA? Also, let me know what you hope that we're going to get out of Dragon Age 4. Do you hope that they somehow go back to kind of that same story where we're in Tevinter and we're acting as spies? And because that sounds really awesome. Can we still get some of that while still being a live service game? As I said, let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, hit me up on Twitter, and we'll catch you next time.